Mr. President, with me today is one of my colleagues from my office, Mr. Nick Ayers, whose good judgment and counsel I depend on. Mr. President, I want to talk about the Medicaid portion of our reconciliation bill, which the President calls our one big, beautiful bill. And I want to talk about the rest of the story.
Welcome to Liberty Trigger. Patriots, buckle up, because what I'm about to break down today is the real story behind the so-called CBO bombshell about Medicaid, and it's something the mainstream media will not tell you. Now, I just watched this speech on the Senate floor, and let me tell you, finally, someone is pulling back the curtain on the other half of the story. You see, the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, just came out swinging, saying that under the new reconciliation bill, what the president calls his one big beautiful bill, 10.5 million people are going to lose Medicaid. Sounds scary, right? Sounds cruel, right? That's exactly how the left wants it to sound. But here's the truth. Most of those people shouldn't have been on Medicaid in the first place.
Now, the Congressional Budget Office is a bipartisan entity, as you know, Mr. President, that advises us on fiscal and financial matters. And I appreciate their good work. A lot of smart people over there. The CBO, as we call it, has issued a report that says, as a result of our reconciliation bill, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, that 10.5 million Americans are going to be thrown off Medicaid. Let me say that again. CBO says that as a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill, 10.5 million Americans are going to be thrown off the Medicaid rolls as a result of our bill. And I don't want to be unfair to CBO, but sometimes CBO makes these statements and they don't give you the context in which they're making the statements. If you say we're going to throw 10.5 million people off of Medicaid and don't explain in detail why they come to that conclusion, that's not fair. You're not getting the full story. You're not getting reliable information. That would be like asking a nun for advice about sex. So let me tell you the other half of the story. I talked about this last week a little bit. Of the 10.5 million people that CBO says we're throwing off of Medicaid, they weren't eligible for Medicaid in the first place. I'll say that again. CBO says we're throwing 10.5 million people off of Medicaid. They weren't eligible for Medicaid in the first place. I talked about this a little bit last week. For example, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services just came out a report with a report of those 10.5 million people that we're throwing off of Medicaid. 2.8 million of them are double dipping. They're double dipping. That's illegal. That's a violation of the rules. That means that a person is signed up. I'm from Louisiana. That means some people are signed up in both Louisiana and Mississippi, for example. You can't double dip. And the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services also found that of that 2.5 million people, 1.6 million of them are double dipping by joining Medicaid and Obamacare. So yeah, they're going to lose their Medicaid. They should. That double dipping costs us $14 billion a year, $140 billion over 10 years. We think in 10-year cycles. That's money that we could use to help people who really deserve Medicaid. So yeah, my friends at CBO, those people are going to lose their Medicaid. Did I mention that they weren't entitled to it in the first place? Now, point two, the reason that the main determinant for Medicaid is income. It's not the only one. The main determinant is income. States are not supposed to sign up people for Medicaid who make too much money. And I regret to say this. I don't know why, but it's human nature. Some people don't tell the truth. Under President Biden, he encouraged the states not to check income eligibility. Just take everybody's word for it. Well, you know, you've probably heard me say this before, but I trust people. But I also, when I play poker, I play with friends. They're good friends of mine, but I always cut the cards. I believe in the old adage, you know, trust in God, but tie up your camel anyway. If the president sends a message to the states, don't worry about checking if people are making too much money, guess what? Some people are going to cheat, and they do. I wish they didn't, but they do. Back in my state of Louisiana, our Louisiana legislative auditor, which audits all the spending in the state, found that they did an exhaustive audit of our Medicaid program. They found back in 2019 that 1,600 people had been signed up for Medicaid, making over $100,000 a year. 1,600 people making over $100,000 a year. Yes, CBO, they're going to lose their Medicaid. They weren't entitled to it in the first place.
First thing you need to know, CBO gives a headline number, but they don't give you the context. And that's exactly how the media runs with it. They say, Republicans want to throw 10 million people off health care. Wrong. What they don't say is that a huge chunk of those people were never eligible to begin with. That's like saying you fired someone who never even worked there. It's political theater, smoke and mirrors. We're talking 2.8 million people double dipping. That means signing up for Medicaid in 2 different states, or being on Medicaid and Obamacare at the same time. That's not a small accounting error. That's flat-out fraud. And it's costing taxpayers $14 billion a year. $14 billion. Do you know what that money could do for actual disabled Americans or children living in poverty? But no, under the current system, it's being siphoned off by people gaming the system. And here's where the Biden administration comes in. Under Biden, states were encouraged not to verify income. Just take people's word for it. No checks, no audits, just sign them up. And guess what happened? People making over $100,000 a year were getting Medicaid. In Louisiana alone, the audit found people making $111,000, $126,000, $114,000, all on taxpayer-funded Medicaid. Folks, that's not compassion, that's theft. And while the left cries about imaginary cruelty, the real cruelty is to the truly needy. The single mother struggling to buy groceries, the veteran who can't afford his medication, the disabled child who needs treatment. Those are the people this abuse is stealing from. Every fraudulent dollar spent is a dollar not going to them. That's what the Democrats don't want you to think about. Now, let's talk about the part the left really hates, the work requirement. This bill says if you're between 19 and 64, able-bodied, not disabled, and you don't have a child under 14, you need to work, train for work, or do community service 80 hours a month to keep Medicaid. That's not even part-time. That's the equivalent of 2.5 hours a day. And yet, the Democrats are acting like it's slavery. No, folks, this is called responsibility. This is called encouraging people to join the American dream instead of being stuck in a government parking lot. The Economist, hardly a conservative magazine, estimated that about 6 million Medicaid recipients could work but choose not to. If they did, taxpayers could save $54 billion a year. That's $500 billion over 10 years. That's money that could dramatically improve services for the people who truly can't work. Here's the kicker. Despite all this screaming from the left about Republicans cutting Medicaid, the program is still projected to grow 20% over the next decade. That's right. Even after these reforms, we're spending more, not less. The difference is that money will be spent on the right people. Not freeloaders, not fraudsters, and not people who just don't feel like working. Patriots. Here's the bottom line. America is the most generous country on the face of the earth. If you're hungry, we'll feed you. If you're homeless, we'll house you. If you're too poor to afford medical care, we'll pay for it. But generosity without accountability is just an open invitation to abuse. And abuse, like we're seeing in Medicaid, hurts the very people our safety nets were built to protect. This bill is not about cruelty. It's about fairness. It's about protecting taxpayers. It's about making sure the disabled, the sick, the truly needy get the care they deserve, without the line being clogged up by fraud. So the next time you hear a headline about millions losing Medicaid, ask the question the media won't. Were they ever eligible in the first place? Because when you dig into the facts, the answer is usually no. And that, my friends, is why this fight matters. This isn't just about numbers. It's about preserving the integrity of our social safety net and making sure the American dream is built on hard work, not handouts. This is Liberty Trigger, signing off. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.